I used to think sickness felt loud. I imagined dramatic fevers and collapsing bodies and flashing ambulance lights, but what happened to me felt quiet, slow, like my body was disappearing one tiny piece at a time while everyone around me smiled and carried on like nothing was wrong. Every morning I woke up with that same awful nausea twisting through my stomach. I would rush to the bathroom before the sun even came up and grip the sink while my whole body trembled. Derek always asked if I was okay, always sounding soft and concerned, but lately his voice made my skin crawl instead of comforting me. "Still sick?" he asked one morning while buttoning his shirt for work. I forced myself to nod casually even though my knees were weak. "Probably stress," I whispered. He stepped closer and touched my cheek gently. "You worry too much, Ainsley." I stared at my reflection after he walked away. Pale skin, dark circles, lips dry from throwing up every day. I barely recognized myself anymore. 6 months earlier, I had been smiling in a white dress, convinced I'd married the safest man in the world. Now I spent my mornings wondering why my body felt like it was dying, while every doctor insisted nothing was wrong with me. The strange part was how careful Derek had become after the wedding. At first, I thought it was love. He always wanted to know where I was going and when I'd be back. He texted constantly. He insisted on driving me places even when I said I could go alone. If I didn't answer my phone fast enough, he'd call twice more. "I just worry about you," he always said with that charming smile everyone trusted. I trusted it too, until the sickness started, until I noticed how closely he watched me every time I ate or drank something. That morning at the hospital, I sat in the waiting room hugging my stomach while a nurse checked my pulse. She looked exhausted, like someone who had seen too many terrible things in life. Her eyes stopped on the gold necklace hanging around my neck. Derek had clasped it around me himself on our wedding day. "Never take it off," he'd whispered against my ear while everyone applauded around us. At the time, it felt romantic, possessive in a passionate way. Now the nurse kept staring at it with a strange expression that made my chest tighten. "That's beautiful," she said quietly. I touched the pendant automatically. My husband gave it to me. Something flickered across her face then. Fear, maybe. She leaned closer while pretending to check my blood pressure again. "Listen to me carefully," she whispered. "Take that necklace off as soon as possible." My heart skipped hard against my ribs. "What?" She glanced toward the hallway before lowering her voice even more. "Don't panic. Don't react, but I've seen jewelry like that before." Suddenly the room felt colder. "I don't understand," I whispered. The nurse pulled out her phone and showed me an old article about a woman who had been poisoned slowly through a piece of jewelry. My stomach twisted harder than before. "That can't be real," I said shakily. The nurse looked directly into my eyes. "Please trust your instincts, Ainsley, and whatever you do, don't tell your husband you're suspicious." After the doctor once again blamed anxiety and sent me home with useless medication, I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel while my mind raced. The necklace suddenly felt heavier against my skin. I remembered how Derek adjusted it constantly, how angry he got once when I almost forgot to wear it to dinner. At the time, he laughed it off and kissed me afterward. Now every memory felt wrong somehow. I drove across town to a tiny jewelry shop tucked between two old buildings downtown. The owner looked about 70 and wore thick glasses that magnified his eyes. "Can you inspect this?" I asked quietly, while unclasping the necklace with shaky fingers. He examined it carefully under a bright lamp for almost 2 full minutes. Then his expression changed completely. "Where did you get this?" he asked slowly. My throat tightened. "My husband." The jeweler looked disturbed. He pointed to a nearly invisible seam hidden along the pendant. "This opens." He pressed lightly and the tiny compartment shifted. My blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" I whispered. He rubbed something near the edge with a cloth and frowned. "There's residue leaking from inside. This wasn't manufactured normally. Someone modified it." I stared at the necklace lying between us on the counter. Suddenly, it didn't look beautiful anymore. It looked dangerous, evil. "Can you test it?" I asked. He nodded carefully. "I know someone who can analyze substances. But young lady, you need to be very careful." My voice cracked. "You think somebody did this intentionally?" He didn't answer immediately. That silence terrified me more than words ever could. By the time I drove home, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my keys. Derek's car was already parked in the driveway even though he wasn't supposed to be home for another 3 hours. Panic crawled up my spine instantly. I touched my bare neck and tried to think fast. The necklace was still at the jewelry shop. Derek opened the front door before I even stepped inside. "Hey," he said casually. "How was the hospital?" I forced a smile. "Same as always. They think it's stress." He nodded slowly, then his eyes dropped to my neck. His entire face changed in 1 second. "Where's your necklace?" My pulse exploded. "The clasp broke." I lied quickly. "I think it fell off at the hospital." Derek stared at me for so long I could barely breathe. Then he smiled again, but it looked forced this time. Tight, controlled. "That necklace meant a lot to me, Ainsley." "I know," I whispered. "I'll go back tomorrow and look for it." He walked past me toward the kitchen without another word. The silence between us during dinner felt unbearable. He barely touched his food. Every few seconds I caught him watching me with this unreadable expression that made my stomach knot. That night I pretended to sleep while he lay awake beside me. Around 2 in the morning, he quietly got got out of bed and went downstairs. I followed the sound of his voice through the floorboards. "I don't care how much it costs," he hissed angrily into the phone. "Find it." My entire body froze under the blankets. He wasn't upset because the necklace was sentimental. He was terrified because somebody else had it now. The next morning, something strange happened. I woke up without nausea for the first time in months. No dizziness, no shaking, nothing. Derek noticed immediately while I ate breakfast almost normally. "You seem better," he said carefully while stirring his coffee. Maybe the medicine finally worked. I nodded even though we both knew I hadn't taken it. His eyes stayed fixed on me the entire meal, watching, calculating. After he left for work, I called the jewelry store immediately. "The tests are still processing," the owner told me, "but I really think you should contact the police." My chest tightened painfully. "Not yet," I whispered. "I need proof." After hanging up, I started searching the house like a desperate stranger breaking into someone else's life. I didn't even know what I was looking for until I found Derek's locked desk drawer in his office. I used a letter opener to force it open, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw the files inside. Medical reports, toxicology records, death certificates, all belonging to a woman named Miranda Hale. My hands shook violently as I pulled out a marriage license underneath the paperwork. Derek had another wife before me, and according to the records, she died only 3 months after their wedding. The exact same timeline as my sickness. I heard a car door slam outside suddenly. Derek was home early. My blood turned to ice while footsteps approached the front door. I barely had time to shove the papers back into the drawer before Derek stepped into the office doorway. My entire body went numb when our eyes met. He looked calm at first, almost relaxed, but something darker flickered behind his smile. "What are you doing in here?" he asked softly. My throat tightened so hard I could barely speak. "I was looking for envelopes," I lied quickly. "I needed to mail something." He glanced toward the desk. The drawer hadn't closed completely, just 1 inch open, but it was enough. His eyes stayed there for a long silent second before he looked back at me again. "Did you find what you needed?" he asked. I forced myself to shrug casually, even though my heartbeat felt violent inside my chest. "No, I'll check downstairs." I brushed past him carefully, terrified he could somehow hear my panic. He didn't stop me. He just stayed there inside the office while I walked toward the kitchen, trying not to run. Then I heard the drawer slide shut behind me. I heard the lock click, and somehow that tiny sound scared me more than anything else had so far. For the rest of the afternoon, Derek acted strangely normal. Too normal. He made coffee for both of us. He asked what movie I wanted to watch later. He even kissed my forehead while I stood frozen beside the kitchen counter pretending everything was fine. But I could feel it. Something had shifted between us. He knew I had seen something. Maybe not everything, but enough. Every time our eyes met, I felt this invisible tension hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Around dinner time, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the jewelry store owner. My stomach dropped instantly. I excused myself and locked myself in the bathroom before answering. "Ainsley," he whispered urgently. The lab confirmed it. Arsenic. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. I grabbed the sink for support while my vision blurred. "Are you sure?" I whispered shakily. "Positive. The pendant was designed to slowly release tiny amounts through skin contact. You need to call the police immediately." Tears burned behind my eyes. Suddenly, every morning sickness, every dizzy spell, every weak moment made horrifying sense. Derek had been poisoning me, slowly, patiently, carefully, like I was some long-term project he planned from the beginning. "I think he knows I'm suspicious," I whispered. The jeweler's voice became sharp with fear. "Then don't go anywhere alone with him." Before I could answer, the bathroom door handle moved slightly. Derek's voice came through calmly. "Ainsley, you okay in there?" I quickly hung up and shoved the phone into my pocket. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. That night, I barely touched my food while Derek watched me across the table with unreadable eyes. The silence between us felt unbearable now. Every movement he made seemed deliberate, controlled, dangerous. "You seem nervous tonight," he said casually while sipping wine. I forced a weak smile. "Just tired." He nodded slowly. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" The way he said it made cold fear spread through my chest. I suddenly remembered Miranda's file sitting in that desk drawer. Miranda Hale, dead 3 months after her wedding, just like me. My appetite vanished completely. Later that night, I pretended to fall asleep beside him while secretly texting the nurse from the hospital. She'd written her number on the back of my discharge papers before I left. I told her everything: the necklace, the arsenic, Miranda. A minute later, my phone vibrated softly beneath the blanket. "Call the police now," she replied immediately. "Please don't wait." I stared at the message while Derek slept beside me in the dark. Or at least I thought he was sleeping until his voice suddenly broke the silence. "Who are you texting?" My entire body jolted. I locked the screen instantly. "Nobody," I whispered. Derek slowly turned toward me. Moonlight hit half his face, leaving the other half hidden in shadow. "You've been lying to me a lot lately, Ainsley." His voice stayed calm, but it terrified me anyway. The next morning, Derek suggested we take a drive together. "You've been stressed," he said while grabbing his keys. "Maybe getting out of the house will help." Every instinct inside me screamed not to go, but refusing felt dangerous too. So I nodded and climbed into the passenger seat while secretly slipping my phone into my jacket pocket. We drove farther and farther away from town until the streets disappeared behind long, empty roads lined with trees. My heartbeat became painfully loud. "Where are we going?" I asked quietly. Derek smiled without looking at me. "Somewhere peaceful." The way he said peaceful made my stomach twist violently. Minutes later, he turned onto a narrow dirt road completely hidden by woods. No houses, no traffic, no people, just silence. He finally parked the car and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Cold, empty. "You found Miranda's file, didn't you?" My blood turned to ice. I tried to speak, but no words came out. Derek sighed almost sadly. "I didn't want things to become messy with you." Tears filled my eyes instantly. "Why are you doing this?" He leaned back calmly like we were discussing the weather. "Miranda was supposed to be enough money for a lifetime, but investments failed, debt piled up. Then I met you." I stared at him in horror while he continued speaking in that same terrifying, calm voice. "Your insurance policy solved a lot of problems, Ainsley." My breathing became shallow and uneven. "You're insane." He smiled slightly. "No, I'm careful." I reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't open. Child lock. Panic exploded through my chest instantly. Derek noticed and almost laughed. "Relax," he said softly. "You won't feel much." Then he opened the glove compartment and pulled out a syringe. I froze completely. "Derek." My voice broke apart. "Please." He moved closer slowly. "I really did love parts of you," he whispered. "That's the hardest thing." Tears rolled down my face while my hands searched desperately inside my pocket for my phone. Earlier that morning, after texting the nurse, she had convinced me to activate emergency location sharing just in case. I prayed it was enough. Derek reached toward my arm with the syringe, and I reacted without thinking. I slammed my elbow into his chest hard enough to make him curse. The syringe fell onto the floorboard while I screamed as loudly as I could. Derek grabbed my wrist violently. "Stop it!" he shouted for the first time. His calm mask cracked instantly. Real rage flashed across his face now. I clawed at him desperately while trying to reach the horn. Then suddenly distant sirens echoed through the trees. Derek froze. So did I. The sound grew louder fast. His face changed completely. Panic. Real panic. "What did you do?" he hissed. Red and blue lights suddenly burst through the woods around us. Police vehicles surrounded the car from every direction. Everything after that felt blurry and chaotic. Officers dragged Derek out while he shouted that I was unstable and paranoid. I sat shaking uncontrollably while paramedics checked my pulse outside the car. The syringe was recovered. The arsenic report from the jeweler confirmed everything. And when police searched our house later that night, they found far more than I ever expected. Hidden journals, dosage schedules, insurance documents, detailed notes about Miranda's declining health. Derek had documented everything like some twisted science experiment. Weeks later, during the trial, I finally learned the full truth. Miranda had tried to leave him before she died. She became suspicious too late. The courtroom felt ice cold the day the jury announced the verdict. Guilty on all charges. Derek looked at me one final time, while officers led him away in handcuffs. There was no remorse in his eyes, no sadness, just anger that his plan had failed. But for the first time since marrying him, I wasn't afraid anymore. I moved out of the house 2 weeks later. I donated almost everything we owned because I couldn't bear looking at any of it. Recovery wasn't fast or beautiful like movies pretend it is. Some mornings I still woke up shaking from nightmares. Some nights I checked the locks on my apartment door 3 times before sleeping. But little by little, life stopped feeling poisoned. The nurse who saved me became one of my closest friends. Sometimes we sat together at quiet coffee shops talking about survival and trust and the strange guilt that comes with staying alive when someone else didn't. I visited Miranda Hale's grave for the first time on a rainy afternoon 6 months later. I left white flowers beside her headstone and cried harder than I expected to. "I'm sorry nobody saved you," I whispered. The wind moved softly through the cemetery trees while I stood there alone. But for the first time in a long time, I also felt grateful. Grateful to still breathe. Grateful to still wake up every morning. Grateful that my story didn't end the way Derek planned. The scar he left inside me may never fully disappear, but neither will my survival. And some days, that feels stronger than fear. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more emotional stories.